they in Canada, I think? They eventually, what does it say? I think he's a hunter. Here's the thing. Yeah. This small rural town called Agony Hill. She feels like she's being attacked and everything and all that kind of stuff. In, where are we? Agony Hill. In Vermont. And it's like, you don't know if he broke out of prison or if he was the president of the United States or both. Is there anything else I want to say? No. Let me have an almond first. Dark chocolate. So, how would you feel about an old school retro wrap up? I used to do this on the channel when it was brand new. I wanted to wrap up every book I'd ever read, so I did all these wrap ups for months of years of books that I'd read, and I was catching up for a long time. So I actually do have 4 books. I'm wrapping up all of the books that have not been wrapped up or reviewed on this channel that are not Agatha Christie or Murder, She Wrote cozy mysteries, because I just don't have a lot to say about those books. So I'm going to wrap up these 4 books. Okay, so actually chocolate covered almonds, not the best thing to be eating when you're trying to make a video. Moon of the Crusted Snow by Waubgeshig Rice, which I read in February 2023. When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, which I read in February of this year. A Quitter's Paradise by Elisha Chang, which I read in May, and Agony Hill by Sarah Stewart Taylor that I just read in July. Okay, so starting things off really strong with Moon of the Crusted Snow by Waubgeshig Rice. I read this in February of 2023. Actually, I think I read it mostly in January of that year and finished it on like the 2nd or something of February, which I hate saying that word. This book was fantastic. It's a dystopian novel narrated by a character named Evan Whitesky. He is a member of the Anishinaabe tribe. Where are they? Are they in Canada, I think? Yeah, they're in Canada. Northern Canada. With winter looming, a small northern Anishinaabe community loses communication. Days later, it goes dark. Cut off from the urban realm of the South, many of its people become passive and confused. They eventually descend into panic as the food supply dwindles with few hunters left in the First Nation. While the band council and a pocket of community members struggle to maintain order, an unexpected visitor arrives from one of the cities in the South. So, yeah, the beginning days of a dystopia, of a post-apocalyptic situation where something has happened to the power grid, the phones, the internet, everything is gone. And they're already kind of cut off geographically, so they're really cut off from the world at this point. I read the first big chunk. I think I read like 15% of it in one sitting on a plane in like maybe an hour. This is the first dystopian novel I've ever read that I actually truly loved. The only other one that I remember liking was The Hunger Games, but I've had bad luck with dystopian novels in the past. The Road by Cormac McCarthy, which I need to reread because I might like it better now, but I did not like it the first time I read it. Bird Box by Josh Malerman, which I really didn't enjoy at all. And I think they all have something in common, which is that they very often kind of skip ahead to like, oh my gosh, this thing is coming, it's happening, and now it's 6 months later, and it's like a really great way, I suppose, of drawing a contrast from one chapter to the next and be like, see how much everything has changed. But I find that, like, first of all, I think it's like done a lot, and secondly, I feel like they're skipping past a lot of the good stuff. What I loved about this was it really sidesteps that issue by letting you see the, panic rise slowly and the tension rise as the days and weeks pass. So it's not like it's writing every minute of every day, but it's not skipping months and months either. Winter comes, it starts to get colder and colder. They start to have more and more issues with food, and they start to, slowly realize, I guess the power is never going to come back on. And at first you think, well, this happens sometimes and we're pretty cut off, so it'll take them a while. And then they slowly realize that's not going to happen. So I was riveted the whole time, instead of being sort of like, yes, dystopia, got it. We are the enemy, people are the dangerous ones. And that is certainly true in this novel, but that was not like what it was trying to do. It wasn't trying to shock me or surprise me with this idea of like, oh, people are becoming really, dangerous and treating each other poorly in the dystopian future. How weird. No, it was like just letting you see the slow progression of things. And then, yes, there's this interloper, this white man, who comes from somewhere in the South. And it's like, you don't know if he broke out of prison or if he was the president of the United States or both. This guy sort of takes over. I feel like this community during winter is like a really smart setting for this kind of dystopian novel, because I feel like in our modern Western society, we really trivialize, condescend to trivialize, and almost fetishize like the old ways of, you know, indigenous people of hunting and gathering and all of that craft, because it's not something that we see as being necessary. It's not something that we need anymore, so it's not maybe valued. And that is true of the characters in this book as well. A lot of them don't really know how to catch and kill and slaughter and freeze and prepare and to do all of the things that maybe their, you know, ancestors did. Evan Whitesky is one of the few who has learned to practice and honor the old ways. So I just feel like it's a really smart setting for this apocalypse. You know, there's no meat packing plants sending out perfect cuts of meat. There's no agricultural industry. You don't have all of that infrastructure anymore. And now you really need to have the ability to prepare your own food. So it's really interesting to see what happens once all the modern conveniences fall away and who is most prepared to deal with that. This book definitely had some major like oh shit moments where I put the book down and was like, oh no. I think it would make a great movie. I read this pretty quickly in between the long periods of time when I was not picking it up to read it because I was distracted because of who I am as a person. But it's a very svelte narrative. It's very like elegant. I also feel like the way the book talks about the interloper coming in was very interesting. I mean, it was very tense. It was very fraught with like racial tension and also just like the tension that naturally exists between men struggling for power and dominance over one another. It delves into the tendency of men to default to violence. And this guy comes in and does that, starts kind of laying down a very strict law and enacting violent justice. And he gains followers by doing so. People are inspired by his action. He's taking action, he's doing something, and so they sort of fall in line behind him, a lot of them, including some of the town's leaders, seem all too ready to let this guy take over. And, you know, maybe in our modern society, there are people who have prioritized being in positions like that. They're not natural leaders. Some men seek out positions of leadership as a symbol of power, but the mantle of leadership is not a natural fit for them. That whole dynamic was really great to read. And at one point, I think I said that it feels like it could go on for another hour, but there were only 19 minutes left. I was like, how is this gonna resolve? I loved this book. The pacing was great. It was a really memorable characters, a great concept, wonderful setting, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. And it's the first dystopian novel I've ever read that I loved, that I gave 5 stars. So that is awesome. And it has a sequel. It came out in February of this year. And I knew that, but I kind of forgot about it. And I haven't put it on my TBR, but I like need to fit it in somehow. Because in the next book, they decide to go back down to like their ancestral lands, which again, sounds like a great commentary while also being an action-packed, fraught with danger, thrilling, dystopian novel. But anyway, Moon of the Crusted Snow, book 1 in this series of 2, 5 stars. When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. Alyssa Cole is known for writing romance and historical romance. I'd never read an Alyssa Cole, so this was the first book by her that I ever read. I read this in February of this year, 2024. I love the characters in this. I liked a lot of the depiction of the neighborhood and its history. This is a story about a woman who lives in a brownstone that was owned by her mother, who was unwell and no longer living at home in Brooklyn, in this traditionally black neighborhood that is slowly being bought up and gentrified and renovated by a bunch of new owners. All of them are white. And the people who swore they would never sell, these black families that have lived there for generations in some cases, are selling because they're getting top dollar for these homes and they're leaving the area and the area is changing. And Sydney, the protagonist, is very, very troubled by this, while also trying to A, hold on to her home, and B, cover for the fact that her mother is very unwell. And people ask how she's doing and she's sort of evasive about it, and she's dealing with a lot and trying to not sell the home, even though it would be financially very advantageous to her to do so. There's a white couple, straight couple, a guy named Theo and his girlfriend Kim, who moved into someone's house like across the street, and we get to know Theo pretty well. So he's living in kind of humiliation in this brownstone with his now ex-girlfriend Kim. Their conflict is really interesting. She seems to be watching him slip away, and Kim, his girlfriend, is like the definition of like casual racism. There are incidents where Kim feels like she's being victimized. There's like a moment in a bodega where like she's not next in line, but she jumps ahead and Sydney says, hey, you were actually behind her or whatever. And then she makes this whole huge deal out of it where she's like, she feels like she's being attacked and everything and all that kind of stuff. There's this horrifying intervention where Kim and some of her friends try to explain to Theo that he's on a bad path because he's hanging out with that Sydney. So she's a hateful character. Her family has rejected him. He doesn't have a job. I think he's drinking too much. And she's like, you know, tearing down walls and doing things to the kitchen in this old brownstone. Which is another thing that is really, I think, touched upon in this novel that is really great, is this idea in this gentrifying atmosphere of all of these white people buying these historically black-owned homes and renovating them. They all have this attitude that like the black tenants were not proper stewards of these buildings. She's banging away at things and waking him up, and he's hungover, and like she's very resentful of him. He's living in like an upstairs room that is not air conditioned. And Theo and Sydney end up slowly investigating what's going on in the town because it becomes very clear that people are not just voluntarily selling their homes and moving, that there's something more nefarious going on. There is a conspiracy. So all of that stuff, I loved the characters and I liked the story of the neighborhood. 3/4 of the book worked for me perfect. All of that was great. I thought, what a wonderful way of talking about gentrification. I felt like the first 3/4 of this novel really kind of transcended genre. But I feel like the book is a thriller and it wrote some checks at the beginning that it felt like it had to cash. It just felt like the first 3/4 of the book deserved a more grounded ending. So I just didn't love the ending. So my initial rating was 3 stars. Because, you know, they ask you to rate the book at the moment you turn the page on your Kindle. And so I wasn't loving the ending and I gave it 3 stars. But I love the character of Sydney so much. And the whole conversation that, and looking back on it now, I have so many positive things to say that I've upped it to 4 stars. And I think that's correct. I might listen to the audiobook. I've heard the audiobook. Rincey reads. On her channel, Rincey said that she listened to the audiobook and it has 2 narrators. There's like a white man and a black woman narrating the 2 halves of the book. And I would like to give it another chance just because I really enjoyed being within the pages of this book. So it's a 4-star read. It was, I didn't love the ending, but I don't know that everybody will feel that way. So I highly recommend it. I'm sure you've already heard of this book. And if you have not, give it a shot. It was a very good thriller. It did more than it needed to. And I think that maybe colored my response to the ending. All right, and then now skipping ahead to May 2024, A Quitter's Paradise by Elisha Chang. I found this paperback in the bookstore in the airport and read it on the plane and immediately fell in love. This is this literary fiction about Eleanor, is the main character's name, with a medical background, whose husband is a very successful research scientist. And she is sort of on that path as well. She has not completed her doctorate yet. And there's a lot of flashbacks to her parents. You get tons of history and what the situation was with the man who her mother ended up marrying, her father, and what it was like for them coming to the US and trying to make a go of it in business. All of that was just so fascinating. What the thing is, Eleanor, she suffers from like affluenza, I've heard it called. Like she is sort of unmotivated. She feels like there's greatness all around her. Her parents' generation, they came here from another country and they made it happen. They were great. They aspired and achieved. Her husband is achieving greatness. And she has all of the tools and all the talent to do that as well, but she's just not motivated, and she feels kind of like this like ennui, where she just sort of feels like maybe that's just not for her. And she's not interested in overachieving anymore. She's tired. I found that really refreshing. Eleanor is funny. She reminds me a little bit of an Alyssa Moshfegh character. It surprised me. She did surprising things in this book. And actually, so did the people in the flashbacks, but especially Eleanor. She's very funny, kind of stumbling through life and making mistakes, and she starts to kind of slide a little bit. She starts to slip, and she's working with her husband on one of his research projects, and she kind of makes mistakes and causes problems for him, and there's strain on their relationship, of course. There's also an affair going on. She's involved in an affair. It's another example of one of the many ways that she's just kind of screwing things up. And she doesn't really have a great motivation to turn things around and fix herself, because she's sort of grasping at straws, trying to feel alive and trying to feel satisfied and full, because something isn't right in her life. I really found it really refreshing and cool. The conversation about generational differences, that, you know, first generation folks that had to work so hard to be safe and to provide for their families, and then their children then feel like unworthy of their parents' accomplishments, unworthy of the life that they're living because they didn't have to do those things. It was an enlightening view of that generational conflict. Eleanor has this attitude about, like, maybe it's okay to just be good and not be great, and to not be a star and not overachieve, but to just achieve. And I don't know, I think that's interesting, isn't it? Is it okay to be good and to be satisfied with that? In our society, I feel like the answer is no. You must become the absolute best. You must push, 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 and have the children and the career and the degrees and the letters after your name, and don't sleep, and achieve it, and then you die. And she has this sort of, it's like she's having this awakening to, like, I've never been happy, and I've never rested my body and my brain, and I just, isn't it okay just to be good and just to be okay? Do I have to be great? Do I have to do the most? And she doesn't want to do that. And I think some people are turned off by this character because we are so programmed to believe that if you don't have all that ambition, then there's something wrong with you. And I don't know. I thought it was really inspiring in an odd way. I'm not inspired by the specific choices that she makes, because there's some doozies in this novel, but I am inspired by that concept of, like, can we let ourselves off the hook a little bit? I love this book as a character study, as an historical drama, for the cultural insight that I gleaned from reading it, and as kind of as a dark comedy. This woman is funny. So I loved it. I don't know. This book has an oddly low rating on Goodreads. I don't understand why. I think it's beautiful. I adored it and I gave it 5 stars. That is Quitter's Paradise by Elisha Chang. Loved it. Oh, our air conditioner's back on, by the way. Our air conditioner was out for like 3 days and it got very warm in here. It was 84 degrees in the main part of the house, and this room where my office is set up, it gets warmer, and it was like, I don't know, 85 maybe? Also, it's just so exciting that we are in, as of me filming this, it's September 4th. We're in the Burr months. I've been to Halloween Horror Nights Universal twice now. We're getting ready to start decorating for Halloween. We're announcing our Halloween party date to our friends and everything. It's a really good time. So, okay, the last book on this wrap-up, Agony Hill by Sarah Stewart Taylor. This is a book that I got through NetGalley, so I did not pay for this book, although I will probably buy a copy of it. I read this in July of 2024. This is going to be part of a series, so that's exciting to know. So it follows Franklin Warren, who is a transplanted Bostonian police officer, basically. He's coming to this small rural town called Agony Hill. He becomes an investigator with the state police in Vermont. He has a traumatic loss in his recent past. He lost his wife, and he's sort of still grappling with that reality every day and sort of healing from that. So he's a bachelor. He doesn't eat well. He doesn't sleep regularly. His neighbor is this sort of nosy amateur sleuth woman. And he comes to this town and immediately is thrust into the investigation of this death. There's a man who owned a farm who was found dead in his barn. The barn was locked and it burned down with him inside. So they're like, how can someone really commit suicide that way? Can you lock yourself in and just let yourself burn? Or was there something else? And of course he suspects foul play, and he has a young deputy helping him who has a nickname that has something to do with him blushing all the time. Pinky. They call him Pinky, which is like an affectionate nickname that I guess he's gotten used to. But yeah, so he's investigating this death. Now this is a town, this is set in Vermont, rural Vermont in the 60s, during a time where the interstate highway system is being built. I think they are probably purchasing people's property to build the interstate. And there's a lot of like back to the land stuff going on, and people wanting to isolate, people wanting to kind of rail against progress. You know, they don't see it as progress, and modernity, and outsiders coming in and everything being connected. They like the idea of staying in their town and just working really hard and not being exposed to culture from outside of their little town and their little world. And they don't, some of them don't like all this progress. This man was one of them, the one who's dead. He wrote all these angry diatribes that were published in the local paper. You know, it's the end of society as we know it, and for all of these reasons. So he's investigating this and also dealing with his demons, and it is a really good time. The little town is beautifully rendered and described. I loved all the characters. I loved the setting. And there's a thing about this novel that I really like, which is that, first of all, it was fun to read a procedural set in the 60s. Second of all, I really liked the fact that the book was kind of slow. Like, the pace was slow and steady. It wasn't boring, and it wasn't long, 320 pages, but it was just slow and steady. Like, and it was cool in a way because it gave you an opportunity to get to know this guy, to get to know the town, and it also matched the energy of this rural town. Like, it just felt right. It didn't feel like a frenetic pace, and the town isn't that. So I really enjoyed that. I liked the fact that it was paced that way. And it was also nice to read an investigator who's very grounded in real life, who's not magical and doesn't have sudden flashes of inspiration like Miss Marple or something, or Poirot. He just slowly works on the problem and tries to figure it out. And it's hard, and he is just good at his job because he's persistent, not because he's a savant. The pace also helps to convey that sense of patience and dogged pursuit of the goal that Warren exemplifies. I thought it was really, really cool the way it was written, and I really enjoyed reading it. I thought it was a really good time. I gave it 4 stars. It didn't change my life, but I really, really liked it. And I will absolutely be reading future installments in this series. I really liked Warren, and I really liked the town. If you need it to be like fast, it might be a little slow for you, but I thought it was great, and it's not that long. It's 320 pages. Give her a shot, guys. So that is it. Those are the 4 books that I wanted to cover. I feel like I've been filming this video for an hour and a half. I haven't, but it feels that way. We're starting to get a storm, and sometimes that means the power is going to go out. So I'm glad that I'm done with this video. The thunder is rolling. Yeah, so those are the 4 books that take us up to August of this year, 2024. I talk about some books that a lot of people have read. So if you have any comments on these books, Moon of the Crusted Snow, the sequel, have any of you read that? Have any of you read the sequel? As always, if you have any comments, if you have any questions, any suggestions, I would love to receive them. The comment box below is your friend. If you can subscribe to the channel and like this video, that makes a big difference. Helps my videos to get actually suggested to you so that you'll know that they exist, the more people like them. So the like button is important. Is there anything else I want to say? No, I guess that's it. So thank you once again for watching this video, and as always, I will be here in the dark as the thunder rolls, reading.